Well, hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. So before I start my Ghostbusters video, I suppose there is a confession I need to make about it. Because my relationship to Ghostbusters from my, sort of pre-watching this, pre-this viewing, because I have seen this film before, a couple of times, but it unfortunately, I suppose it's sort of the age I grew up in. And sort of, the fact that I was born in the 90s, and of course by the time I was at the age where I would start watching things like Ghostbusters films, or things like Back to the Future, the sequels were obviously quite prominent. Now, this does mean, and this is a confession that I'm reticent to make, but I will put my hands up and say immediately, I saw Ghostbusters 2 before I saw Ghostbusters. And of course, even though I've seen Ghostbusters since, it means I have a much more vivid knowledge and relationship of Ghostbusters 2, in the same way that I have a much more vivid knowledge and relationship to Back to the Future 2 than I do to the original film. And of course, the funny thing it means for both those films, and particularly in Ghostbusters 2, is that Ghostbusters 2 is essentially a retread of Ghostbusters. It is plot beats, structure, character relationships, is just a diminished, walkthrough of the same film with just a few cosmetic changes. But because I saw it first, and because I had, obviously as a child, it was part of my developmental sort of relationship with film, it means when I watch the original Ghostbusters, I've definitely, in the past, gone, well, Ghostbusters 2, and I'm sorry about this, but I've definitely in the past thought, well, Ghostbusters 2 is better. And I know I'm wrong. And I know why I'm wrong, and I know how troubling that kind of thinking is. And of course, I've had to sort of teach myself to sort of think about it. And it's not that Ghostbusters 2 can't be better, but what I'm doing is I'm making the association backwards, that Ghostbusters 1 built the foundation and Ghostbusters 2 simply walked over the bridge that Ghostbusters 1 sort of lay down for. And it has been a while since I've seen either of the Ghostbusters film, except for I have, however, seen the new one, and I will get onto that, but I've given myself enough of a gap that this has been quite the refresh. And of course it's great. Ivan Reitman's Ghostbusters is a truly great foundational film. This is a film that defined the 80s, defined the blockbuster. It allowed I've mentioned before, and I'm sure it's a common aspect of my video content, is the fact that I love genre hybrids. And I love the idea of people experimenting with different ways of telling narratives. And the beauty of Ghostbusters is the fact that it's essentially, and someone once said this to me and it sort of stuck with me, it's a workplace comedy that just happens to be about ghosts. In the first hour, perhaps as you get into the second hour, it becomes more about the supernatural aspect of it. But as you watch the first hour, you could take the ghosts out and replace it with something else, because the ghosts are almost arbitrary. It's just about these three friends, colleagues, who, are sort of down on their luck, who are intellectuals but have sort of been kicked out of academia and are trying to make their way in the corporate world, the corporate sort of side of it. And of course it's about 80s, sort of business-mindedness, and it's about quirky guys with ideas trying to sort of find their way in modern corporate America. And then it's about ghosts. It just happens to also be about ghosts. But the beauty of it is it knows exactly when to hit each beat. So the fact is it smartly opens with a sequence that practically is a horror film. It's practically a Poltergeist-level horror scene with the opening, the inciting incident. And Sigourney Weaver's role, again, a lot of the scenes that she's in, when she's with Bill Murray or the rest of the team, but when it's by herself, smartly, Ivan Reitman treats those scenes like they are in a serious horror. And I think that was an incredibly smart decision. Because then, of course, you have the inciting incident, which, okay, it doesn't involve Sigourney Weaver, but again, serious horror opening, and then goes into sort of the camp of the theme song, and then, of course, it introduces us to Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramos, their dynamic. And then, like I say, the first hour is practically just a comedy. The supernatural element is happenstance. It's about the chemistry between these three actors. It's about their goofiness. It's about the humour and the nature of the scenarios. And the way it's structured is practically like it's practically like a series of vignettes or sketch comedies that just happen to be about the same group of characters. You get that sense of like when they're going to view properties, and of course they say, the one says, lists reasons why the firehouse that they're looking at should be condemned. And of course you then have Dan Aykroyd shooting down the pole saying, this is great, when are we going to sign up? You have the fact that Bill Murray, like, each one of the characters has their own relationship, but none of them, the strange thing is, none of them are absolutely devotedly wanting this to be a success. You have Bill Murray, who treats it like a scam artist, who sort of wants to profit off it, but really wants to get laid from it. You have Dan Aykroyd, who frankly strikes me as someone who just sort of wants to be around friends. And of course he likes the science of it and understands the science, but he just sort of, kind of has that aimlessness to himself. And then you have Harold Ramos, who is sort of this devoted scientist who, frankly, just wants to do science. He doesn't really even understand the business side of it. He's practically, a machine man who just wants to do science. And none of them really know what they're doing, but the three of them together, it's not like one of them drives the other two forward. It takes all three of them together to sort of make it work. And I think that's what's brilliant about it. That's what makes it work so well. One cannot function without the other. Something I forget, and again, this might be the Ghostbusters 2 in me, or just sort of the Mandela effect. Ernie Hudson is barely in this film. Well, he's not barely in this film, I'm being a bit disingenuous. He is in a lot less of the film than I could ever have imagined, or ever remember him being in it. And I understand why. I've read about it, the fact that it was originally supposed to be... oh, bloody hell, the name's gone out of my head. Nutty Professor. What's his name, producer wife? Eddie Murphy. It was originally, thank you. It was originally supposed to be Eddie Murphy. And they couldn't get Eddie Murphy for whatever reason. And so Ernie Hudson was brought in, and I don't know if the role was always diminished, or whether they diminished it because they couldn't get Eddie Murphy, and if they can't get Eddie Murphy, well, let's just make this almost a secondary role. And it's a shame, because Ernie Hudson's brilliant. I think the four of them work really well together, which is why, of course, we think of them as 4 Ghostbusters, not 3. But again, it's very strange to notice how much of this film he's just not in. He's just not there. He's just not there. For the first hour, he's just not there at all. And as I say, the Sigourney Weaver stuff is just so good. And it's such a departure for Sigourney Weaver, from my perspective, even though I imagine roles like this probably made up more of her early career than I'm aware of. Because, of course, like most people, when I think Sigourney Weaver, I think either action hero, vis-a-vis Alien, or I think incredibly nuanced dramatic actress, who Oscar caliber dramatic actress. And I don't really think of her as love interest / damsel in distress. It's just not an association I make with her. She is, a powerful, almost feminist icon of the 80s who represents a different kind of woman. But in this case, she is much more, and I imagine if I were to go into her early filmography, like a lot of actresses, this is just what was on offer. But again, she makes it work. She's really good in it. There is this sort of constant eye-rolling way that she has to deal with Rick Moranis' character, with Bill Murray's character, the idea that she has all these, and Bill Murray's character, frankly, Venkman doesn't come across well in this. Like, it's one of those roles that you think, oh, this age is worse and worse, because he is a creep. He's such a creep in this, and and obviously it's knowingly making the character like that. But the idea that she ends up falling for him is sort of head-scratching, because he is unbearably weird to her in this film. But again, they even in that weird relationship, that weird dynamic, they have inexplicably good chemistry. And of course Rick Moranis, who is just great, and I can see why they insisted on making sure he was back in the sequel, because he could have easily been a character who just got forgotten about. And Rick Moranis is just so, as someone who is just this sort of there for the jokes. But again, if you think about it as a series of vignettes and sketch comedies, he has many scenes, including that party sequence, just to do his thing by himself. And he's so funny in them. And I think that's the beauty of it. It knows when it needs to hit exactly the comedy beats. It knows exactly when to hit the sci-fi, the supernatural sci-fi stuff, and it knows exactly when to make it sort of more traditional story, heroic storytelling. I do very briefly want to talk about the 2016 Ghostbusters, because, of course, and of course, the reason why I wanted to watch this is because this is one of a number of films coming out this year, maybe next. I'm not quite sure what's happening with delays, but for the most part, coming out this year, remakes of classic films. I might make it a loose theme, because there's a trilogy of films that are definitely classic remakes that are getting a new version this year, including the three being Ghostbusters, Candyman, and Top Gun, and those, again, would make good videos to talk about. But just jump back to the 2016 Ghostbusters, and I don't fully understand why it didn't work. I kind of do, but I get frustrated. I mean, I definitely was in the camp of wanting to see, I love the Bridesmaids cast. I genuinely think they are such a great ensemble, and essentially are the modern version of that 80s cast. SNL actors, already established comedy actors from feature films, and just a great series of a great sort of team of people who we already knew worked well together. And for whatever reason, it just didn't quite work in the way that it should have done. It wasn't helped by the negative press and all the Meninists and female Ghostbusters people that of course came out before. If anything, people like me went in kind of wanting to enjoy the film more in spite of those people, and consequently kind of left the film going, yeah, it was okay. It was only over time that you kind of look back and go, it's not very good. It's not. There's nothing particularly memorable about it that makes it, stand the test of time in the same way that the original does. I think it sets itself up for failure in some respects, and the reason it got the sort of negative attention, which of course got it more press, is the fact that it was marketing itself as practically a remake of the original, but with an all-female cast. And I think that was already an incredibly challenging way to set yourself up, because it is essentially a remake of the original, but with an all-female cast. But why would you put yourself in the shoes of one of the greatest comedy films of all time? It felt like it was unnecessary, and it should have gone in its own direction. It should have found ways to make that cast sort of bounce off each other in new and original ways, rather than trying to sort of recapture the magic of the original. And like I say, I don't know, that chemistry still should have lifted it, but it just didn't work. It felt more like someone in a marketing office went, let's remake Ghostbusters. Oh, people love Bridesmaids, and they want a sequel to Bridesmaids, which we will never get, sadly. So, let's take those actors and put them in the Ghostbusters. It doesn't feel like it was an organic decision. It doesn't feel like the cast got together and Jon Favreau, I think, who directed it. It's not like they got together and went, let's make a Ghostbusters because we genuinely believe in it. It felt like they just thought, well, these things should work together. It felt very calculated, and I think that's why possibly why it didn't work. And then, of course, we've got this new one, Afterlife, which I'm a little concerned is going in the other direction, where it's trying to be an actual sequel rather than a remake, and it's trying to also capture the Ghostbusters vibe of a couple of years ago, even though that's already running out of steam. And I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if really Ghostbusters should ever have had anything after the original. Even though, like I said, I quite like the sequel because I saw it first. Even that, I'm like, did we need any of this? Because Ghostbusters worked by itself. It worked as a standalone, perfect, original concept film. And sometimes you can't make more of that. It is just what it is. And of course they would, because it was so successful, because it could be replicated or franchised, they would try. And of course in 100 years, people will probably only think of the original. Who's to say? But it's such a good film. And I do hope The Afterlife is good, or at least finds a way to capture the magic in a new and original way that brings Ghostbusters to a new audience, I suppose. But who's to say? I really enjoyed this. I was really pleased I came back to it. And this is definitely a classic film.